Hey everyone, it's Brendan at Westcott. Today we're going to do a deep dive on flash photography. Now this is a second part to a popular video that we did on speedlights, so if you're interested, feel free to go back and reference that one. But today we're going to get a little bit more in depth. People are always interested in just general flash photography. What power flash do I use? Things of that nature, and those are the things that we're going to dive in today. So if you haven't seen a video here on our channel, make sure you click that subscribe button below and hit that bell. That way you'll be notified every time we create a video, and we do it fairly often, usually about once a week. Now, without further ado, let's jump into flash photography and taking the intimidation out of your flash photography. Before we get too far into things today, I want to go over a few terms with you, things that I may be referencing throughout the class that you may or may not know. And so these are very important, kind of as some groundwork before we get started. The first thing is going to be high-speed sync. Now, high-speed sync is something that you'll see in all of the FJ series flashes, and it's something that's pretty important if you're the type of person that likes to go outside and shoot in full sun. Now, high-speed sync allows you to go above or faster than your sync speed on your camera. It's different from brand to brand, but sometimes they're around 1/250th of a second or 1/320th of a second. And now with high-speed sync, you're able to burst through those shutter speeds and go all the way up to 1/8000th of a second and everything in between to basically get correct exposure and to allow your flash to overpower the sun and get a good exposure on your subject's face. Now, so what does high-speed sync do? High-speed sync actually is a pulse of flash instead of one single flash. And so you're going to, when the shutter is opening and closing, that light is going to pulse and expose your subject's face or whatever during that shutter speed. So that's high-speed sync. The next thing that I want to talk about, and a term we're going to be covering, is TTL, and this is through the lens metering. And so TTL is kind of, think of it as an automatic setting. And we're going to dive deeper, but TTL is, the camera's kind of doing the guesswork. The camera is reading the scene, and it's going to put enough light, or what it deems as enough light, onto your subject. So that's TTL. Recycle time, that's something that's very important. With a modern strobe, you want to be shooting quickly. You don't want the technology to limit what you've got. So the recycle time references how fast the strobe is going to keep up with you as a shooter. So if I say a recycle time is 0.9 seconds, from the time that flash bursts, it takes 0.9 seconds for it to be ready to burst a full flash again. So that's recycle time. Ambient light, this is a huge one that I'll get into. Ambient light is simply going to be what light is in the scene that you're shooting in. This can be both for indoors or outdoor photography, and you want to know the ambient light because every situation is going to be different for you. Now, so many times we get people who ask, what settings did you use for this photo? And generally what I tell people is it doesn't matter because it's not going to be the exact same for you unless we're in a completely black room. That's the only time it's going to be the same. But during this class, I'm going to be outdoors shooting, I'm going to be indoors shooting. I've got different levels of ambient because I've got video lights that are filming me. So don't worry about the settings. The settings are going to be what you determine, and it's really not that difficult. But ambient light is going to be the ambient lighting in your scene. And the last thing I'm going to talk about is different groups and channels. And so groups and channels are specific groups and channels on the strobes that I'm using, or the flashes that I'm using. Now, groups are important because you can have one light on group A, and one light on group B, and one light on group C, and so on and so forth. And on each of those different groups, you can have a different power setting. You can also have one group reading manual light or manual power, and then the other group doing TTL power. So you can kind of control that through different groups. And on all the strobes and flashes that I'm going to show to you today, they all have the ability to have multiple groups. Now, channels is also important, especially if you're in an area that may have a lot of interference. Maybe you share a studio with another photographer and you want to be able to shoot your scene and not have your flash firing when they are firing their flashes. So channels allow you to be on different channels, so different kind of universes. Think of it like that, where you're separated. So if I'm on channel 1 and my colleague is on channel 3, we're not in the same universe. So whatever she does on channel 3 and I do on channel 1, we're kind of doing our own settings. All right, so that's important to know for groups and channels, so let's keep going. Now, the things that we're going to cover today, we're going to cover why does lighting matter? It's obviously a very important question, and it's a nice preface to the entire class here today. We're going to talk about when to use lighting, and that will be, do we use on-camera lighting? Do we use off-camera lighting? How much power is appropriate for our flash photography? And then how can we improve our lighting? There's one, it's easy just to learn the lighting, but then how can we make it better? How can we take it up a notch? We're going to go into TTL lighting versus manual lighting a little bit more in depth and show how that works and what the camera is actually seeing in TTL versus a manual setting. And then the last thing we're going to do is we're going to get creative with in-camera lighting techniques. People rely so much on Photoshop, Lightroom, things of that nature to do post-processing. I want to show you all the cool things that we can do in camera with minimal, and I mean minimal because I do not care for post-production. So let's dive in. The first thing I always say is lighting is your secret sauce. And how I equate this, think about a recipe. You may have a favorite recipe that you make, but when you go over to a friend's house, they just can't seem to make it like you do or like you prefer. So I think of photography in the same way, whereas the lighting is your secret sauce. And you can take something boring like the image you see right here on your screen, and you can turn it into something like this with lighting. So let me show you in this actual scene, I'm going to show you my thought process through this further down in this presentation. But lighting is something you control. Everybody has the same camera, the same lens, or some kind of combination of that. Not everybody has the same types of lighting. And when I say that, you can move a modifier from this position right here, back here, and you get two totally different recipes or lighting situations. So we're going to show that, and I'm going to show what lighting does and how it really affects your image and your final result. So let's jump in. The first question we say is, when do we use lighting? And it's a simple answer, but a lot of people seem to get it wrong. Let's go into it. First scenario, we use lighting, low lighting. In this image you see right here, it was a nighttime shoot. I was out in an alley situation, and we just didn't have much light. So you see the ambient light involves some lighting on the buildings on both sides, the left and the right. You also see some China balls, or what we refer to as China balls, kind of overhead of our subject, but there just wasn't any light hitting our subject's face. So this is a really easy setup where I just brought in a little bit of light from camera left and added some light to our subject's face, and boom, it makes the image obviously pop. Now, when you go back to the previous slide, nobody would ever look at that and say that's a good photo. And this photo that you're looking at right now isn't the best photo, but at least our subject is lit. And that's really what I guess I'm trying to get across is, in a low lit scenario, you need to bring in some kind of lighting, all right? So the next time you would want to potentially use lighting would be if you want to get hard lighting. Now, both of these photos that are up on the screen right now have hard lighting on the edges of the subject's face. The main light, and we'll talk about kind of main lights a little bit further down the line, the main lights are on the subject's face, creating a very soft output on the subject. But to kind of make it look a little bit more, I guess, intense or specular, I decided to use what we call rim lights on the left and right edge of both of these subjects' face. Now what this does, it can kind of create a little bit of a grungy look. It can kind of increase contrast, which is something you may want to do. I know a lot of people will want to use hard lighting if they're taking a sports portrait, where they want to kind of create a little bit of an edgy kind of look. They'll do a technique very similar to this. Maybe a musician, if it's appropriate, you may want to kind of use this hard, edgy lighting. So hard lighting. And hard lighting, and we're going to show an actual example. I've got Olivia here with me today, where we're going to take some photos of Olivia, and I'm actually going to create hard lighting. But opposite of hard lighting, we have soft lighting. Now, a lot of people, when they think portraits, they think about soft lighting. And soft lighting is very appealing because it's very fresh, it's very clean, it's beautiful. And so both of these images were done with the intention of soft lighting. Obviously, the little girl on the left, young children, you generally want to go for soft lighting. I think of babies. I never want to make a baby look like edgy, unless you maybe put some drumsticks in their hand and you put a Metallica hat on and you want to get that really edgy type of look. Then maybe you do want to get hard lighting on a baby. But most newborn portraits that I've seen involve soft lighting. And so we're going to talk about how we achieve soft lighting. So jump right into that exact sentence, and these two phrases that you see right here are very important, just as good basis points when you're introducing lighting into your photography. And the first one that people are more likely to gravitate towards is how to achieve that soft lighting. And if you've never seen these, this is the base point that we want to get after. Soft lighting, the larger the light source in relation to your subject, the softer the light's going to be. And then opposite that, the hard lighting, the smaller the light source in relation to your subject, the harder the light will be. So let me show you an example of this. I've got my FJ80 here, which is our speed light. And if the light source is this size, right here, it is going to be harder than it will be if it's here. And do this exercise real quick. Take your fist, pretend that fist is your light, and pull it away as far as you can from your body. It's going to be a certain size. Slowly bring that fist towards your face. Bring it 2 inches. It will be larger in relation to you. So just doing that simple exercise, same thing works with lighting. If I have a small source or any size, the farther away it is, the harder it's going to be. The closer it is, the softer it's going to be. All right? So that's a good exercise and a good tip for kind of a starting point. Another thing that's important to know, how you modify the light is very important. So I could easily take this, keep it at the same distance, but put a modifier on it. And when I say a modifier, a softbox, some kind of a diffusion dome. And I could easily make this, 1.5 inch diameter flash larger without even having to move it. And when I make that larger, it's going to soften the light. So those are 2 ways that we can quite simply soften and harden the light. All right, so those are 2 basis points. Now let's bring in Olivia, and I'm actually going to use our FJ200, and I'm going to show you a step-by-step process of starting with a hard light and making it softer. All right, so we're in our first setup. We are going to be using the FJ200, and we're going to be using just the grid attachment with the reflector that's included with the FJ200. And this is going to create a really hard, edgy light. You're going to see contrast, and you're going to see bright highlights on the left. And so that shows you a really edgy look. Also, you'll see a shadow on the background on the right side, and that shadow is also going to be fairly hard and edgy. All right, so now I've got the FJ200 with the diffusion ball on the front, and what this is going to do, as opposed to that grid, which is very directional, this is actually going a much wider, a much broader spread, which is making the light appear softer. So let's take a frame using the diffusion ball, and what you're seeing with this is you're seeing a much softer look on the left side of her face. You're also seeing her hair is a little bit more illuminated. The hair is going to be illuminated because instead of that light focused right directly on her face, it's spread out. So now more light is getting out and expanding into places that it wasn't before we put the diffusion ball on. Now, taking it one step further, if we want to go for really soft light, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm actually going to use one of my favorite modifiers, and we'll get into modifiers a little bit later, but this is called the Apollo Orb. It's a 43-inch octa modifier, and I'm going to throw it on. Again, I'm not changing the light's location. I'm simply just changing how we modify the light. All right, and you're going to see a bigger difference once I put the Apollo Orb on this. So let's jump into that. All right, so now I've got the Apollo Orb. The Apollo Orb actually takes the light and it reflects. So this entire inside of the Apollo Orb is silver. The light reflects against all that silver material, and then it will push out through this diffusion front. And so I did not move the stand. I simply just spun it around. And so let's take a shot of Olivia now with a much larger light source in relation to our subject, and we'll see what we get. All right, so as you can see, the light has gone from soft to really soft. And what I'm looking at, when we say soft, I'm looking at not only the skin, but I'm also looking at the shadows and the contrast levels. Those are the things that we talk about when we talk about soft light and hard light. And then the other thing that's important to note is that, you know, I mentioned when I'm bringing the light close and far away, know that the power levels of the light are changing when I do that, okay? So it's in relation, it's physically the size in relation to your subject, and you also have to adjust the power levels to get proper exposure when you're moving a light closer and farther away. So let's put these up on the screen again. The one on the left, that's going to be hard light. That's with strictly just a reflector and a honeycomb grid. The middle one, we put that diffusion ball on. And then the one on the right, that's going to be our Apollo Orb, which now is a 43-inch diameter of a light source as opposed to the initial one, which is about a 2-inch diameter. All right, so we've come a long way. All right, let's head on back and we'll keep on talking about what power level is right for you when you're using flash. All right, so how much power is enough power for you? And the answer is it's always going to be situational. How much gear do you want to carry? Do you have a big bag? Are you traveling locally? Are you jumping on an airplane? Do you have to kind of keep your gear minimal? Are you climbing a mountain? Are you going to be in a studio? These are all questions that you need to ask yourself. But what I want to show you is I want to show you flash equivalents, something like an FJ80 or 200 and 400, and show you who it would be appropriate for and why you might want to use that as opposed to another flash. So the first one I want to talk about is the FJ80. The FJ80 is a nice little round head flash, and we use round heads because round heads fill softboxes and modifiers better. Okay, so they have a little bit more of a spread. The FJ80 is a flash that can be used on camera, and so this would be useful for people maybe who are doing weddings or events and just need to be portable. They really don't have enough time to be moving light stands, or maybe they don't have any floor space to have a light stand. The FJ80 is a perfect light to have on camera, but it also can be used off camera. Now the FJ80 is a universal speed light, so that means it can be put on any camera system. You don't need a specific one to your camera system. You simply turn it on and then you tell it what camera you are using. So that's a really nice feature of the FJ80 speed light. When it's off camera, it can be triggered by either another FJ80 or it can be triggered using the FJ X2M remote system. So multiple ways to use this both on camera and off camera. And again, it's for those people who want to be mobile and want to keep that flash light, portable, but more importantly, most likely on camera. Now, another light and portable option is the FJ200. And the FJ200 is going to be a very simple flash. This one has another round head. Again, the round head is important for filling a softbox evenly. And as you can see, very portable. It's a little bit smaller than a 70-200 f4 lens. So if you want to kind of compare it in size to maybe a lens that's in your bag, much smaller than a 70-200 f2.8. And the people who would be using the FJ200 would be people who just want to remain portable. Let's say I have to hop on an airplane, but I still need to bring 3 lights for the setup that I'm using. This might be a good option. It still has high-speed sync, TTL, so you can still go out there and you can compete with the sun using something like the FJ200. And it just is a really portable option for portrait, for wedding photographers, if you're doing formals, inside the church, if you're doing something with low ambient, or if you like to shoot with shallow depth of field, this is going to be absolutely perfect for you, even outdoors. Okay, so the FJ200 is a great portable option. Now, if you're in a studio, or if you are the type of photographer that wants to have the control of shooting at f16, really deep depth of fields, the FJ400 is probably going to be your option. The FJ400 is a battery on board, everything you'd ever want in a strobe with TTL, high-speed sync, all that sort of thing, and it can still be triggered by the FJX2M trigger. It can also be triggered by the FJ80 if you wanted to have the FJ80 as your on-camera flash, maybe at a wedding, but you wanted to have some power off camera. They all work in the same ecosystem, the FJ80, the FJ200, and the FJ400. So if you're the type of photographer that really needs power, the FJ400 is the right one for you for indoor, outdoor use. Bright sun, no problem. F16, no problem. This is going to be the strobe that you'll want. But the beauty is they all work together. They all work in the same ecosystem, and you can easily trigger them, and they all communicate on the same channels and same frequencies. So it's really a nice family to work within. All right, so that covers how much power is necessary for different types of photographers and the different lights. Now let's jump into why we use lighting a little bit more. And this is one I love the most, and that is fill lighting. Fill lighting is extremely important. And you may call this balance lighting, fill lighting, that sort of thing. But look at these two images. Oftentimes I see photographers go out, and more so natural light photographers, they have this issue that they're facing. Do I get a pretty blue sky? Oh, but look what happens to my subject. They go completely dark. Or do I get my subject lit with the natural light, but look what happens to my sky. It's gone completely white. Well, when you use fill lighting, you have the best of both worlds, and I've lit this photo, and I've got a blue sky, and I've introduced the light that lights up my subject perfectly, and now I have the best of both worlds. So fill lighting is something I use a lot. I love shooting outdoors, and I love finding different interesting locations. So how do I do this with fill lighting? I take an ambient exposure, and that means what would my camera read on the scene if I had no lights, okay? And I'm looking at the background in particular when I'm measuring my ambient exposure. So in this particular frame, I wanted a blue sky. I knew that. The colors were kind of nice because it was fall time, so I wanted to get some fall colors. And then the last thing that I had to do was pop on a flash coming from camera left and lighting up my subject's face to expose her properly and evenly as well. So that's as simple as it is. Take an ambient reading, then introduce your flash. Get your ambient reading how you want it, then introduce your flash, and then you can dial your flash up or down depending on how you like it, okay? So here's another example of when I balance lighting. You can kind of see the setup. The image on the right, that's going to be kind of a wall that's full of flowers. And if you can see, there's a small little black part right in the center of that wall, and that's actually a window. So I had my subject standing in that window. Because there's a wall, I was able to have an assistant holding an umbrella, a simple umbrella with a flash, shooting right through the diffusion umbrella, hitting the subject, and when I framed the subject, here's what it would look like using just the available light. Now the flowers in the foreground are nicely exposed. The greenery in the background behind the subject is nicely exposed, but with no light going off, I have to introduce a flash. And what I did was I introduced a flash, and there we go. I've now kind of created the entire scene where she is coming into frame and the flowers are balanced nicely. Now let's say you wanted the flowers to be a little bit darker. Maybe you think that flower on the left edge is a little bit too bright. Well, that's the beauty of photography. It's subjective. And so what you could do is you could actually darken those flowers however dark you want, and then still introduce the light. So it works that way as well. You get the light in the ambient looking how you want, then bring in the flash. So one more example. This is a shoot that was done kind of in a heavily wooded area, and so lots of shadows. It's going to be hard to see any light hitting our subject's face, and pretty much getting a silhouette of this young girl. And then boom, pop some flash, and we've got her exposed. We've got the background looking exactly how we had it previously, and that kind of creates the fill lighting. What we're going to do now is we're actually going to go outside with Olivia, and I want you to be a fly on the wall. We're going to do two setups. We're going to do the first setup using fill flash on camera, so same kind of principle, where we're going to take Olivia, we're going to put her in a setup and see what the lighting situation is, and see where the shadows are. And then we're going to fill some flash in with on camera, and then we'll maybe change locations, and we will use off camera flash, and I'll show you how we can get more directional light with Olivia, both using fill flash techniques. So let's head outside. All right, so now we're outside. I'm going to show you a quick example of using the FJ80 on camera. We're not taking it off quite yet, and I'm going to show you a great use of on-camera flash outdoors, and that's using fill flash. So what I'm doing first is I'm measuring the ambient reading. I'm simply just taking exposure like I would if I'm out taking a photo of nature, and I'm getting my settings dialed in camera, and then I'll turn my flash on. And the flash, all it's simply doing is filling in the shadows on Olivia's face. So what you'll see here, I'm going to show an example with and without on-camera flash as fill flash. Now, as a diffusion, I'm going to use this diffusion ball that simply pops on with a magnet, and that's going to soften the light and just make it a little bit more widespread than it would be if I'm using just a bare speed light. So let's go ahead and shoot, and we'll show you the results. All right, so the first thing I'm going to do is look at my ambient reading. Now I'm going to just turn the flash off completely for this, and right now I'm looking at, looks like I'm ISO 100, I'm shooting f4, and I'm actually shooting with a shutter speed of 1/800th of a second. So it's actually above the sync speed. Beauty of the FJ80, I'm actually going to shoot in high speed sync, which means sync speed doesn't matter. So I'm going to turn my flash on, and I'm going to shoot a little bit with high speed sync at those settings that I previously explained. So look right here, I like that, just kind of a half smile, Olivia. Beautiful. In that first image, I got kind of a dark face. Everything in the back looks great. We actually have the sun out right now that's creating a really nice rim light or hair light on Olivia's hair. So it's creating that natural separation between her darker hair and the dark background, but her face is falling a little bit dark. So all I'm going to do, I'm going to turn my flash on. I'm going to shoot at power level. It's pretty bright out here, so I'm going to just go to power level 8, and I'm just going to fill in those shadows in her face. And the wind's kind of going crazy right now, so let's let that calm down. Perfect. And we're not making Picassos here, we're just showing you kind of what that fill flash will do. So that's the first setup. That's a good way to use on-camera flash to actually just fill in the shadows. It's called fill flash, and that's probably the extent of why I would use a flash on camera. Now let's jump over here and we're going to take another setup using the FJ200, a little bit more of a powerful flash to do a nice portrait of Olivia. All right, so this next setup, what we're going to do is we're actually going to take the flash off the camera. We were using the FJ80 on camera in a fill flash situation, and now we're going to use off-camera flash. Now the benefit of off-camera flash is you as the photographer get to make the creative decision of which direction you want the flash to be coming from. And so in this instance, I'm actually looking for a background. I always try to search out a background first, and I've got this nice blue sky, I've got clouds in the background, and what I'm going to do, and I've got a little bit of sun coming on from camera right, hitting Olivia's face. And so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna balance out that powerful sun with the off-camera flash. Now I'm using the FJ200, I'm using the Octa M, which is a good medium-sized Octa. It's 36 inches large. And that's gonna be enough to put a really nice soft flash onto Olivia's face. So I'm gonna do it just like I did last time. I'm gonna take a frame just to show you what the ambient light looks like, and then I'm going to turn my flash on and I'll show you what the flash looks like in this scenario. Now, to trigger it, I'm using the FJX2M trigger. This is the universal trigger, and I can do everything from this trigger. So I actually don't even need to go to my light to access any of the controls on the light itself. So let's go ahead and we'll take a few frames and I'll show you what it looks like. All right, Olivia, so the first one I'm gonna take, I'm just turning the flash completely off. This is just showing what the ambient looks like, and it's gonna be a nice blue sky. In my settings, I'm shooting at shutter speed of 1/4000th of a second. Okay, I'm shooting at ISO 100, and my aperture is f4. Okay, so those are my camera settings. Now, when I say camera settings to you, that doesn't mean go out and plug those exact settings in. It's different on every situation. So if I had cloud cover, it's gonna be way different. If I'm indoors, it's gonna be way different. This just happens to be, you know, the time of year, the time of day, and these current settings is what I'm dialed into. So that'll always change. Dial those in first, and then go ahead and put your flash on. So I've dialed it in. I've got this first image, and as you can see on the left side of her face, it's pretty much completely in shadow. So I'm gonna go ahead and turn my flash on, and I'm gonna take a frame, exact same crop. And as you can see there, I'm filling in, and I'm actually bringing more power from the left side now than the sun is bringing, or what it appears to be bringing, okay? So if I wanted to balance that out, I can actually go ahead and turn my flash down. I was at full power there, and this is again on a 200 watt second. So if I wanted to bring in a lot more power, I could go ahead and bring in something like the FJ400, which is double the power of the FJ200. So let's go ahead and turn that on to power level 8, and you'll see this is just a little bit less as far as the light hitting Olivia's face, but still a nice exposure there, as you can see. So that's using the FJ200 off camera, and that provides a little bit more direction, a little bit more intent of what I'm trying to do as a creator. And it's subjective. So if I wanted this light to kind of come from the other side, I could simply do that. In fact, let me show you just real quick. It takes all of 4 seconds to now bring this light over here. And what I'm doing, you'll see, I'm actually using the Octa M to block the sun on Olivia's face. So now she's in shadow. I have complete control, okay? So instead of competing with something, I have complete control. So right there, stay right there, Olivia. And so now, what you can see, I simply just brought the light from a different direction, and I have a totally different look. Again, it's your creative choice. All right, as you can see, lots of opportunities when using off-camera flash. Let's head back to the studio. All right, so those setups, obviously very important for fill flash outdoors, but the same principles apply if you're indoors and you wanted to get an ambient reading before you introduce flash. So think of it like this. Maybe you're at a beautiful wedding reception and there's chandeliers or there's flowers that are lit up in the background, and you really want to show that as part of your scene. Take your camera out, measure the ambient reading. It's going to be, a lot slower shutter speeds because you're not having to deal with sun any longer, and then you'll be able to introduce your flash into the scene from whatever direction you'd like. So ambient works both ways. Ambient can be outdoors, ambient can also be indoors. All right, so moving on, let's talk about issues with using flash. I get so many people who say, it looks awful. Well, that's a great blanket statement. If you use flash incorrectly, it can look pretty bad. And that's what people are intimidated by. I'm here to tell you, there's no reason to be intimidated by using flash. Now, the things that will cause you grief when you're using flash, oftentimes it's the direction of the flash. And I'm going to get into that, and I'm going to show you how we can fix that. The quality of the light, so how hard and how soft the light may look. You saw it with Olivia earlier when I was doing my indoor setup. We did just a bare flash, essentially, to start off, and we changed the quality of the light. We went from a hard source of light to a semi-diffuse source of light to a diffuse source of light. And so you can kind of progressively change the quality of light using modifiers. Harsh shadows. This is one thing that people often see, and that's because they're using bare lights. Bare lights are really a no-go in my book, and I'll show you why and how I fix that using modifiers here in a little bit. Glare on reflective objects. Obviously, you've got a burst of a flash, and we see so many things in life that have glare or gloss on them. It could be the oils in somebody's face. It could be a metal door handle in the background. It could be a piece of glass in your background. And when you burst the bulb or any kind of flash, it's going to highlight those glossy areas and make that glare even more prominent in your scene. So glare on reflective objects is a big one that I hear a lot about. Sometimes people say the flash will flatten your subject. That's true if you're shooting on-camera flash. And it can kind of be a nasty look. And the same thing with colors being washed out. That's very common with on-camera flash. Moving forward, let's talk about how can we improve our flashes and how can we make flash look better. And so the first one we're going to go into is bounce lighting. And this is something that a lot of people will do with a speed light. And let's go, and I'm going to bring Olivia over to the wall, and we're going to show you how we can improve our flash when we're using it on camera, and that's going to be how we bounce it. So let's head on over. All right, so I'm here with my FJ80 on camera in a traditional setup. So I've got it kind of in that 90-degree angle. And what I'm going to do first is I'm going to take a photo of Olivia right up against the wall. So right here, and this is just flashing right at Olivia. And as you can see in this shot, it's pretty, I hate to use the word ghostly, but it's very ghostly in the fact that it's just a ton of light coming eye level, and it looks like a mugshot. I'm sorry, Olivia, but it doesn't look appealing. So what are some things that we can do to make this type of lighting look a little bit more appealing? Because this has its time and its place. In an event or at a wedding, when you're just doing quick run and gun, you can do something quick and easy. But what if I want to make it look a little bit nicer and I have a little bit more time? I can use a technique called bouncing the light. Now, bouncing the light is when you turn the flash into a completely vertical position, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to allow the light to travel all the way up to the ceiling and bounce back down, and that's going to be the light coming from a different direction, basically overhead lighting, and lighting my subject. So let's try that. wow, it didn't work. And I didn't even have to look at my LCD screen to know that it didn't work because I am in an environment where I know that is not a possibility. And that environment is I have 25-foot ceilings and they are black. So not only does the light have to go 25 feet up, it also has to come 25 feet down to hit my subject, which that means you're consuming a lot of battery power, but it also is hitting a black ceiling, and that black ceiling is just going to suck all that light up. So if you want to bounce just purely off of a ceiling, your best situation is to bounce off of maybe a 10 to 15 foot ceiling. 15 foot might even be stretching it a little bit, and you want that ceiling to be white or maybe a mild cream color, just because that's going to reflect the light back down in a more natural way. So another thing that you'll want to do is you'll want to get some kind of a bounce on your flash, and I like to use this little magnetic dome that just snaps right on to the FJ80. And what this will do is now I'm pointing this light at Olivia, and since this is a 360-degree globe, that light is now going to push forward, and it's going to be a little bit more appealing than just directional flash. So let's go ahead and take a photo of Olivia like that. All right, so that looks a little bit better. Now remember, when you put any type of modifier on your flash, you're going to need to increase the power of your flash. And so I was on 5 power. I'm going to go ahead and I'm actually going to increase that really easy with the touch screen here on the FJ80 to a power level of 8. I'm going to take that shot one more time. And now you can see that light looks like it's coming from a little bit higher, a little bit more above, and it's a little bit more appealing. Now I'm going to take it one step further and show you a way I like to bounce flash, and that is not off the ceiling, but it's off something to the side of your subject. So what I'm going to do for this setup is I've got a giant white wall that Olivia is standing up against. So I'm going to have Olivia rotate her body, and I'm going to go over here and I'm going to use the wall as my bounce. So I don't need the diffusion dome anymore for this. So I'm actually going to put that down. I'm going to put my flash back into this position, and I'm going to angle it at the wall. And so this is really important. You really want to kind of see where your flash is going and how it's going to hit your subject. And just know that if you angle it like this, it may not look as well. Okay, so I'm going to angle it kind of right where I feel like it'll angle back at Olivia in a really nice way. And instead of having this little 1.5-inch diameter flash, now I've got a 8-foot wall that's going to really kind of look a lot better. So let's go ahead and take that photo. I think I'm going to be able to dial my power down too because I took that diffusion dome off. So I put it down at power level 6. Let's see what that gives us. And that's a nice soft outlook. I'm going to bump it it's a little bit underexposed, but I'm heading in the right direction. Beautiful. And now I have it looking like I'm using a softbox off to the left side, when really I'm only using an on-camera flash. So those are a few tips. If you don't have a giant white wall, which I don't know why you don't, just kidding, make sure you carry a white reflector with you at all times, because instead of having this wall, I could be anywhere. I could hold the reflector right here, take the photo, and I still have a bounce source that I carry with me. So you see there's a few limitations with on-camera flash. However, we did work around them and we found a few creative ways to make on-camera flash look a little bit nicer. If there's one thing that you can do, and the one thing that you learn from today's deep dive, it's take your flash off camera. So I have my flash, I've got my camera, how do I make that work? And so I'll show you a few different ways. Now, with the flash these days, all of the FJ series flashes actually have a radio or a receiver built right into the units. So the FJ80, the FJ200, and the FJ400, they all have receivers built right in. And I've got something called the FJX2M, which is a transmitter, and that transmits out a signal and it fires all the flashes. So this simply sits right on top of my camera, and this X2M trigger actually works multi-brand. So that means if I turn this on, I can easily change my camera setting just by simply pressing camera, and I can go from Fuji to Canon RT to Olympus to Lumix to regular Canon mode to Nikon and Sony. So I've got so many possibilities with the X2M trigger in powering my off-camera flashes. So the other cool thing about the FJ system is, let's say I've already invested in the FJ80, I can get rid of that FJ X2M trigger, and I can actually use this speed light as a trigger to trigger another FJ80 off camera, to trigger an FJ200 off camera, or to trigger an FJ400 off camera. So this is also a transmitter and a receiver because it can both transmit and receive signals using the FJ system. So with the power of radio and this wireless communication, everything kind of works well, and it all works together on the same ecosystem. So it's really easy to go ahead and take your flash, put it on a light stand, put it in a light modifier, and put it off camera. So let's talk about modifiers and why they are so important to using off-camera flash. All right, so light modifiers. This gets back to that earlier comment that I made about secret sauce. How do you want your image to look? It's going to look different if you have a strip versus a beauty dish versus an umbrella versus a softbox. Is a softbox the same as a light modifier? Let's get into that. A light modifier is anything that can modify the light. I bet you didn't know that. That wasn't a given by the name of light modifier. So which one do you get and what do they do? And that's the million-dollar question that I get often is, I'm a studio photographer, but I also go out and shoot weddings. Or I do food photography, but I also sometimes will, take pictures of my kids on the weekend. What type of modifier is best for me? And the answer to that question is situational, okay? Sometimes you may want a big round light source because you think it's appealing on your subject's face. Sometimes you may want a strip just to kind of highlight the edge of your subject. Sometimes you want an umbrella because you kind of want more of a forgiving. So let's go down what each of the modifiers do and how they can help you in different scenarios. So an umbrella, let's start with the basics. An umbrella is a very simple, affordable light modifier, and it simply just will go into an umbrella receptacle on your lights. Most lights have just a little round area that you'll put your umbrella through, and umbrellas come in two different flavors. They'll come in either a shoot-through or a reflective umbrella. Now, a reflective is what it sounds like. You are actually reflecting light into a silver or a white material and bouncing that light back towards your subject. And so a white interior will give a soft kind of output, and a silver interior will give a more punchy or specular output. So which one's right for you? What's your preference? Do you like kind of more of a crispy or punchy look in your images, or do you like a very soft look in your images? So that could be a determining factor. Now, opposite, there's the shoot-through umbrellas, and shoot-through umbrellas allow you to shoot light through the umbrellas. And I call this the most forgiving light modifier there is. The reason I say that, when you've got light shooting through the diffusion panel, you've got light going north, south, east, west in a 180 degree direction, okay? And so if I change the light direction from, this to this in an umbrella, it's really not going to do much because I still have that 180 degree coverage, and that light is very, very forgiving. So if you want something that's maybe easy to learn on, a simple shoot through, diffusion, umbrella might be a good starting point for you. Now, as you grow in photography, you want to have more ability to control your light and put the light exactly where you want it to go. And that's where something like a softbox would be ideal. My preference is the rapid box. They open and close in literally a second, and so they're really easy. They come in a variety of sizes. You can get squares, octas, strips, beauty dishes, and they really are just extremely portable. The other thing that they allow you to do, sometimes I like to use speed lights when I'm shooting out on location because they're small, they fit in my camera roller bag, and I can put a speed light insert on a rapid box because they take different insert attachments on the back side. But when I come in the studio, maybe I want to use my FJ400, which is a Bowens mount. And so there's two different mounts. Back in the day, I used to have to buy a different modifier for every different type of light I owned, which got expensive. If you go with the rapid box switch, you can buy one modifier and then you can change the light insert depending on which lights you're using. So if I'm using my FJ80, I'll use one type. If I'm using my FJ400 or FJ200, I'll use the Bowens mount. So they're really easy to switch out. So that's why I like the rapid box. Not only are they small, they open quick, provide a beautiful quality of light, and they also are future-proof because you never know what light you're going to switch to tomorrow. So there's also something like the Apollo Orb or the Medium Apollo. I was using the Apollo Orb earlier when I shot with Olivia, and those open and close like a rain umbrella. And not to get into too much history about Westcott, but Westcott actually started as a rain umbrella company. Long time ago, over 100 years ago, Westcott was a rain umbrella company. And so back in the 70s, we started creating umbrellas that you kind of open like an umbrella, but it opens into an octa, or it opens into a strip, or it opens into a different shape than a traditional umbrella. And so I like those because their speed and their durability. They're built with fiberglass ribbing, so they're really nice modifiers. So the Apollo series is another softbox that I like. So softbox is direct light, and I can put the light exactly where I want it. And that's where you really have to be good with your lighting with a softbox, because then if you change the direction from this to this, you could get an entirely different light pattern on your subject. So once you kind of graduate from an umbrella and you can kind of move towards a light modifier or a softbox, that's when you really start to shape the light a little bit more. So another question I get a lot is, do I go square or do I go round? And so in this example, you'll see in the catch lights, it's pretty much the same exact quality of light on your subject's face. You get a little bit more surface area with the round modifiers, but which the round modifiers then would be a softer light, right? Because it's a little bit more surface area. But what I like to do is I like to use a square indoors, and I like to use a round outdoors. And there's the reason why. The reason is you consider your environment. And if I'm outdoors, what's our natural source? It's a round sun, right? So if I mimic that with a round light source outdoors, I think it looks nice on the subject's eyes. If I'm indoors, I want to try to maybe create a window light per se. And so I can kind of do that with a square softbox. And then a strip, I mentioned it earlier. Strips are great for hair lights, edge lights, kind of separating lights on your subject. They can be right alongside, they can be coming from behind, and they do a really nice job because of their narrow profile. They can kind of highlight areas very precisely on your subject. And then the last thing, there's grids on modifiers. So what does an egg crate grid do? An egg crate grid will actually kind of focus that light even more. Okay, so you have your light modifier, which generally they have slightly recessed edges, but that grid will focus the light even more. So how do I think about this? I think about if I had a bucket of water and I threw it at the person in front of me, not only they would get wet, but also the people next to them would get wet, okay? Because water would kind of splash everywhere. Let's say I have no grid on my light. The light would kind of just go everywhere if I threw it out or if it shot out of my strobe. But if I have a grid, it really kind of isolates the direction of that light, and it only gets, you know, the person that I'm pointing the light at, it only gets them lit up. So that's what a grid would do. And then the last thing, a common question that we get is, why are there so many diffusion layers in my softbox? And when I say so many, there's generally two. There's something called an inner diffusion panel or an inner baffle, and then there's an outer diffusion panel or an outer baffle. And the reason that inner diffusion panel is inside there is that is important for the light spreading out and filling up your entire softbox. So let me give you an example. Let's say I buy an Octa L, which is a 4-foot wide Octa, and I don't choose to use my inner diffusion panel. Well, you've got a source of light that is going straight forward, and it's only hitting that 48-inch or 4-foot diffusion panel on the outside. When you're doing that, that light, because they're generally coming from a small beam or a small source, it may not fill up that entire 4 foot. But if I use my inner baffle, the light is first hitting the small inside baffle. It's helping spread the light even more in filling up the entire 4 foot of the Octa. So, you know, some people I see buy a large light source like a Octa L, yet they don't use that inner baffle. Well, you should have just saved your money and bought a 2-foot Octa, because that's essentially what you're doing when you don't use that inner baffle. You're not maximizing the size that you paid for in the 4-footer. And so that's why you use that inner baffle. So let's jump into our next subject, and that is feathering the light. This is a cool tip that you can use when you're shooting groups or if you want to get a really soft look on your subject. All right, so one of the tips that I give a lot of people who are new to lighting or maybe want to change up their lighting or maybe just aren't positioning their light the best is something called feathering the light. Now, look at this example that I've got here. The first image on the left, that's me walking up. I'm just putting the light right next to my subject, and I'm expecting good quality soft light. But as you can see, it turned into more of a split lighting setup because I didn't have the light moved forward enough. So in the second image, I moved the light towards me a little bit, about 2 or 3 feet, and I allowed the light to kind of feather out and spread like it naturally does, and that wrapped the light around the subject's face and caused it to be much more appealing light. So let's bring Olivia in, and I'll show you that here in studio of that actual light placement and that light movement and how I feather the light. All right, so we've got a scene right here where I'm going to show how we can feather the light. Now, a lot of people will walk up and they'll actually use their modifier. They'll just put it right next to their subject and take a nice portrait, and they'll get a decent shot. But as you can see in this first image, I'm anticipating getting more split lighting than anything. So I've got my FJ200 in my Apollo orb, and I'm going to take just a nice headshot of Olivia. Good. And as you can see, we've got a line kind of right down the center of Olivia's face. And what you can do real simply is pull the light out like so and move it in front of her, all right? And so you may think, well, that light is going to go directly in front of Olivia and not hit Olivia. Wrong. Light has a property where as long as Olivia can see any part of this diffusion panel, there will be light that comes out and hits Olivia's face. So you can even ask your subject, you can stand in their position, and you can kind of look to see if they're seeing any of that diffusion panel. But light has that property. Remember, when it comes out the face of the diffusion panel, it's going to spread out. And so I know that my light here is going to come out, and it's actually going to help wrap around Olivia's face. So let me take another shot like this. And so comparing and contrasting these two images, you can see the quality of light on Olivia's face is much nicer, it's much softer, it's not as direct, and so it's really, really appealing in my opinion. So one thing you'll notice as well when we feathered the light is the background got a lot darker in that second image when we moved that light out. That's because that light wasn't hitting the background as much as it was in the previous shot. So what I'm going to do, because Olivia has darker hair, she's not blonde, she's not gray, but she has darker hair, I'm going to actually show you how we can create a backlight, and that'll help separate Olivia from the background. So over here, I've got an FJ80 that I'm going to pull out, and this is just, again, a speed light. So I talked about different channels and groups earlier. I'm going to keep that on group A, and I'm going to put this light on group B. Now, to get into this, I want to make sure that my FJ80 is a client. It is not the main light, so it's not the host. I'm not using it on camera, so it's not the speed light. It's simply a client, so I'm going to touch on the client, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to point this light right towards kind of the back shoulder of Olivia. So if I'm positioning it, I'm going to kind of point it right at the back shoulder, like so. And power level 5, I'll see if that works. And I'm going to take a first shot using this. Now, to see what this is actually doing, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to turn my main light off. And I can, again, do all that from right here on camera. I'm going to go ahead, turn this off. And this next shot that I'm going to take is simply going to be just that edge light. What I'm looking for, is the light separating Olivia from the background? Is it creating kind of that edge light to separate her from the background? So the only light that's going to fire is the one in group B, which is that speed light. So one of the things you'll notice when you look at that image is that it is in fact doing its job. It's lighting up the shoulder, it's lighting up the hair. I like those two things, but one of the things it's also doing is lighting up her nose, her chin, her cheek a little bit, and I don't like that. I still was getting a little bit of encroachment onto her nose, so I decided to actually move the light all the way back, and it's actually coming from behind her. It's going to be pointed towards her shoulder. It's still going to catch her hair. And let's take that shot now. And there you go. As you can see now, I am only getting light on her hair, on her shoulder. It is doing that job of separating Olivia from the background. So once I've got that dialed in, I'm going to go ahead and turn my main light back on, and we're going to make the entire portrait kind of come together. Beautiful. So now I've got a good separator, not only from the background, but also I've got beautiful, clean light on Olivia's face. So that's using a second light and bringing in a second light as a hair light. But what can I do different to maybe spice this image up in just a quick moment? Well, I can use that same grid holder, but I can actually put a gel in there, and I can kind of change some color temperatures. So I've got, with the gel pack, I've got different color options. They're color corrective gels, but I can even use them to kind of warm up or cool down a setting. And so I'm going to use a CTO, and I'm actually going to warm that background up because I've got nice daylight balanced light coming from the foreground. Maybe I have a warmer color background. So that's done real quickly using the gel. I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to take the grid off. Okay, so the grid comes right out. Put that aside. And then I'm going to pop the gel right in to the same spot, twist it in. And if you're wondering, you can use a gel and a grid on the same magnetic piece. And so now, instead of pointing it at Olivia's shoulders, I'm actually going to point it at the background because I want the background to be kind of warmed up. Okay, and so you can use this. This is another way to kind of create that separator and separate your subject from the background. So real quick, take one more shot. Very, very simple. So those are a few things that you can do using not only feathering the light, but also creating that hair light to separate Olivia from the background. And then I quickly changed it up by adding a little bit of warmth to the background using simple gel and adding a background light. All right, let's head on back. So now you can see just a few of the ways that you can make your flash look a lot more appealing. And again, the big one is taking that flash off camera. Once you do that, you control the light. Think of it like the sun. How much is it a pain to go out and have the sun in a different part of the sky than what you desire? What I like to do is I like to have my sun with me. My sun is my light, and I can control the direction of light, I can control the quality of light, and I can control everything else of where my subject is in relation to my light, in relation to the background, when I'm using off-camera flash. Now the sun is just one part of it, and the light is just one part of it. You also need your modifier. Everybody loves going out and shooting on a nice cloudy day because the light is even, it's smooth. But if you go out on a sunny day, you have deep, harsh shadows. Well, I would never go out with just my strobe unless I'm going for a really hard look. And so I always like to travel with my version of a cloud, and that's the modifier. It's whether you have a softbox or an umbrella or simply just bouncing into a reflector. Always having that cloud or that modifier with you is equally important. So something a lot of people always ask me is, well, I only have one light. Can I still make great looking portraits? And the answer is yes. I use one light often. And so what I want to do now is I want to show you just a series of photos using just one light. So this first shot, I took it downtown in Toledo, Ohio. Actually, it was a perfect day. Had the street almost blocked off. That was because there was no traffic. And I had the subject stand in the middle of the road. This was actually for an umbrella cover shoot. And I simply had one Apollo orb. It was coming from camera right, and you can actually see that in the shadows down to the bottom left of the subject. So that was simply just one light, and then I used the ambient when I actually measured for the ambient, just like I said previous. This next shot, again, one light. I used a small rapid box, or Octa S, and that was coming from camera left, because you can actually see the shadows on his left, which is our right, side of the face. And then you look at the hair light that was used. You say, wait, I thought it was just one light. It is one light. I often like to use the sun as a second light. And so for this, I had the main light, which was an Octa S, a 26-inch rapid box, lighting from left. And then I also had that sun peeking through the trees, and that was actually lighting his hair. And so it is a two-light setup, but only one off-camera flash. This next shot was just one light, and this was an engagement shot that I did out in New York City. Again, I was kind of run and gun, and I needed something portable. I also needed something forgiving because I only had 20 minutes to do this couple's engagement photos. So what I did was I had the makeup artist, she actually had hired a makeup artist, I had her holding an umbrella just off camera to the right. And remember, I said umbrellas are quite forgiving. So that did a nice job of putting equal light on her as did him, okay? All right, this next image is just a simple family portrait. I was using a 3-foot Octa. It's coming from camera right, okay? And just a little tip, if you ever see an image that you really love and you want to kind of study and try to guess, you know, maybe what size modifier was being used, what shape modifier was being used, there's 3 things that you can study. The first thing is how soft or how hard, you know, the lighting is. And again, remember I said you can see that with the shadows. The second thing, and that will tell you maybe how large or how small the modifier is. The second thing that you can do is actually study the catch lights. And the catch lights will give you an indication, was it a round softbox? Was it a square softbox? And you can really kind of dial in and figure out what size or shape modifier by just those catch lights. And then the third thing that you can look at is the shadows. And the shadows will be the dead giveaway on which direction the light is coming from. So if you study those three things in any photograph, you should be able to kind of get a general idea of what type of lighting was used. So again, simple family portrait here with one light. The next one you'll see here is actually that same kind of setup where I was feathering the light earlier. This was done outdoors with an FJ400. Simply just one light, no hair light. She does have blonde hair, so you kind of see that separation with the blonde hair and the dark background, but just a one light setup. This was actually a shot that I did at a workshop. And so, I found myself an interesting background. They had these wood features kind of hanging from the ceiling, and I thought it was really neat looking. I had my Octa S, which is a 26-inch octa-shaped modifier, and I used just a simple speed light on this one. You can see the direction of light is coming from left to right, and I kind of have the right side of the photo has gone into shadow. So that's another one light shot. And the last one light shot I'll show you is just, a simple one. Again, I find cool locations. That's one of the biggest things that I do as photographers is I try to look for an interesting location. It could be a beautiful blue sky. It could be a bunch of trees like you see here. It could be a cool pattern on a wall. I look for an interesting location first, and then I bring my subject into it. And it really makes for a beautiful portrait. So really no excuse to make a bad shot, even with just one light. Now moving forward, let's talk about TTL versus manual mode. This is one of the big questions that a lot of beginning photographers ask is what is TTL, what is manual, and which one should I use? Now, the difference that you need to know is think of TTL as an automatic setting. TTL stands for through the lens metering. So basically what that's doing is it's actually reading your scene, pixel by pixel. It's seeing how many lights or highlights are in the frame. It's seeing how many darks or shadows are in the frame. And it's kind of evaluating it as a whole. And whatever comes through the lens and hits your sensor, that immediately is talking to your flash. And it's telling the flash, we've got this much light, you need to add that much light to get a good even exposure. So where could this run into some problems? On some other units out there, the TTL isn't that great because if I have somebody wearing a black shirt on a black wall, it may tell the flash, you need to put a lot of light out because all it's seeing is blacks and shadows. And so it's saying to get that medium kind of even exposure, you need to push out a ton of light because all I'm seeing is black and shadows. Oppositely, if I have somebody wearing a white shirt on a white background, it may tell the flash, you've got plenty of light. You don't have to work very hard. Just put out a little kiss of light and you should expose the scene just fine. Now, why would that be a problem? Skin tones. Skin tones are not going to be evenly or properly exposed if it's not getting a good understanding of the scene. So the FJ400, the FJ280, they all do a great job using TTL. And here's a great example of what we are doing with TTL. All right, so this is one of the coolest features of the FJ series of flashes, and I'm going to be using the FJ400 today to photograph Olivia using a TTL mode. And then I'm going to figure out what that TTL equivalent was in manual. Now, why is this useful? Number one, if you're just getting started using off-camera flash or the FJ series of products and you're trying to figure out what power setting is great for what environment, TTL to manual is a great mode to learn. Second, if you're the kind of photographer that maybe does events and maybe you're in a fast-paced environment, maybe you're doing graduation photos, something like that, where you're putting a subject that may be wearing a different color top or maybe there's a group of people getting together on a background, and you are in a fast-paced environment, so you don't want to dial in the manual exposure every single time. Or TTL may give you inconsistent results, whether somebody's wearing really dark colors or really bright colors. If I take a test shot of Olivia on TTL, I can then hold down the TTL to manual button right on the strobe itself. And when I hold that down, it will tell me what output the strobe is firing at TTL. From there, I can fine-tune it just a little bit. But why this is great, if you're doing a fast-paced shooting environment, you want to be shooting in manual. You want consistent flash output every single time, and you don't want to have it going up and down in a TTL mode based on what your subjects are wearing in the frame. So let's go ahead and take that photo. First thing I'm going to do, this is in Group A on my FJ400. I'm going to go ahead and put Group A into a TTL mode. And I'm going to take just a quick frame of Olivia in TTL. Perfect. And the reading is absolutely beautiful on TTL. So I'm happy with that. Now, all I simply do on the FJX2M is I hold down TTL to manual. It told me that in manual mode, it just took a frame at 5.6 power. If I take that exact same photo, boom, perfect exposure every single time. So now I know if this is a fast-paced environment, maybe I'm at an award ceremony and there's going to be somebody coming up holding an award, but they're always going to be on my gray background. I know to get proper exposure on the face, which is skin tones, things like that, I want to be shooting at 5.6 power on my FJ400. And that's going to give me the consistent results, and that's the beauty of that TTL to manual mode using the FJ series. All right, so you see how well that TTL to manual works. It's really kind of cool because you don't need to buy an expensive light meter, and for somebody just starting off, you can kind of get a sense of what does 5.6 power do for you as a photographer, and in what environment would that be useful. So let's go back to the chart, the TTL versus manual chart that I used my great Photoshop skills and created. As you see with TTL, it's kind of giving that even equal exposure every single time. Now, why do I prefer manual? I prefer manual because I like to have the creative control. And this kind of represents a three-point lighting setup. Whereas TTL, you're getting even light for the key, you're getting even light for the fill, and you're getting even light for that hair light. But what if I want to be a little bit different? Maybe I want good even light for the key, maybe I want just a little bit less light for the fill, and maybe I'm really feeling like I like a lot of backlight. Maybe I've got somebody with dark hair on a dark background, and I really want to create that separator. When I put each of those in manual mode, I have the control. I don't rely on what the camera's reading, that sort of thing, in picking for me with TTL. So that's just why I prefer to use manual. I like to have that creative choice, but certainly TTL is great on the FJ series of strobes, so certainly you can be welcome using that. So the next thing I want to talk about is my thought process. If I go into a certain scene, I want to kind of talk about my thought process. What am I thinking? What am I looking at? Those sorts of things. So I think I've said it before, I often look for an interesting background. And as you can see here, this was actually done at a hotel lobby somewhere in Cincinnati, and I thought this was a really cool, really unique background. It was reflective, so I knew that could potentially be a challenge, but I like the pattern of it, I like the color of it, that sort of thing. So step one, find that cool, interesting background. Now, step two, I took just a test shot. Now, this could be maybe where you test the pose. This could be where you look at the ambient reading on what the background is letting in. This photo that you see right here, which was my test image, actually was lit using a window light. Okay, so this was available light coming in, shining through a large window in the hotel lobby, and that's what was providing that little bit of light onto my subject's face. As you can see here, kind of dull, not much light. That was my attempt at just using a natural light. All right. So the next step that I do is I actually bring in my light, my first light. And for this, I was using a 26-inch Octa S Rapid Box. And it was coming from camera right. As you can see, she's kind of looking directly into the light there. And I was truly just kind of testing what that single light was doing. Oftentimes you see me, when I'm starting to introduce multiple lights, I like to build them one at a time. I like to see what each light is doing just by itself before I kind of bring them all together. And so that's what I was doing here. I was looking at how much reflection that, because I knew it was a reflective background, I wanted to see, was there a big reflection on that background? As you can see, yes, there was. But I do like the lighting quality on her face. I think that's nice. And so that was my first light that I brought in, was that main light. The second light that I brought in happened to be a hair light, okay? And so I brought in the hair light, and I kind of created that separation from her in the background. And then the third thing that I did was I made the background more interesting. I thought, okay, I'm getting a glare or a reflection on the background from my key light. What if we exaggerated that? What if we made that look intentional? Because I still love this scene, but I didn't really care for that white daylight colored glare on the background. So instead, I decided to use an orange gel, a CTO, a color temperature orange gel, coming from the floor, shooting up, and actually almost enhancing that reflection on the background to make it look like there was a glow coming from behind her. So I used that CTO gel. I exaggerated that orange because I thought it worked well with that bronzy background color, and I thought it looked nice. Okay, and then the final photo that you see here shows kind of everything coming together. I tried some different poses, that sort of thing. So I've got the main light, I've got the hair light, and then you see the background light as well. Now, the one thing that you don't see here, but you'll see it here in this next frame, is I did add an highlighter. I thought a little bit of fill light coming from the below, kind of kissing some light back up into her chin was a nice touch. And then what you can see there is the different groups I'm using and also the power level of each light. Now, again, the power level is almost irrelevant just because it's all based on your situation that you're in. The one thing I may have changed, the hair light, is instead of being like 1/32 power, I thought that might be a little bit hot. This is me just looking back at it and critiquing myself. Maybe 1/64 power would have been more appropriate for that setting because I think it got a little bit hot for my personal taste just with that hair light. Okay, so that's my thought process when I'm going through and I'm kind of creating a photo and building a scene. Let's talk about getting creative with Flash. And this is a tip that I have for you. You will find, like I said earlier, that you can do so much with just one light. But what I want you to do is I want you to master one light before you go out and get a reflector. Okay, so start with one light, get so comfortable with that one light that you just are bored. Okay, once you're bored, then add another light. And I think it's best to add a reflector. A simple silver white reflector will get you through so many situations, both indoors and outdoors, as a fill light, as even a background, like kind of a hair light. So a reflector is a great purchase for your second light. Even though it's not an actual light, it is a light source, it is a light modifier. Okay? Then I'd say get two lights. Now you're playing with a main and a fill, or a main and a hair light, or a main and a background light, those sorts of things. Then you should just buy 20 lights because, well, you need 20 lights. The point is, get comfortable with one, get comfortable with minimal gear. You can make great images with minimal gear, then start adding on based on your comfort level. When we're talking about getting creative with flashes, one of my favorite all-time images is from a friend, Bruce Dorn. Now, Bruce did this with speed lights, and this is an awesome photo that he did using the Prescott Fire Department out in Arizona. I think it's a beautiful environmental photo. It looks like they just, got finished fighting a fire, or, and they're just posing. So what is unique about this particular photo is the fact that Bruce used 9 speedlights. Okay, Bruce has been using flash for years. So remember, he's not just using one. But when you show this grid of where these lights were, you had 2 lights just lighting the firemen in the foreground. You had 3 lights boomed up, lighting the fire truck in the background. You had 1 additional speed light lighting the firemen in the background. You had a speed light in each cabin of each fire truck, kind of creating some atmosphere and some environment within those fire trucks. And my favorite light of this whole thing was a speed light mounted right in front of the ladder with a red gel, and that kind of popped every time he took a frame of these firemen. And so instead of waiting for an actual light on the fire truck to go off, he controlled that. Okay, so he really did a great job of controlling this entire scene that you see here. And I thought, I love this photo. I think it's a great environmental photo, and it shows really how creative you can be with speedlights. Okay. Another thing I like to do is fake sunlight on a cloudy day. Now for this, we're going to jump back outside with Olivia, and I want to show you how we can make it look like it's sunny on a day where you really can't control the environment and it's actually cloudy. So let's head on outside with Olivia, and we're going to show you how we can fake sunlight in the middle of the day. All right, for this setup, I'm going to show you how to get creative with your lighting, and we're going to fake a sun in the background. So here's the setup. I've got the FJ200, which is right here. It's in an Octa M. It's a nice broad softbox, so it's going to be really nice soft light on Olivia's face. And I have it coming from the direction where the sun is coming. Now, you could say, why do you fake the sun when you actually have sun? Well, because I don't always have sun. And in this environment, I actually have a lot less light, so I'm not going to be able to see the sun peeking through all these trees. So I'm going to fake my sun. It's pretty easy. I've got an FJ400, which is in the back. I've got a full stop CTO. So CTO, color temperature orange, a very orange gel on that. And that's going to mimic my sun. I'm not going to get it in the frame. What I'm kind of intending to do is just get the flare of the FJ400 coming from the top left corner of this shot. And so it's going to look just like you've got that sun kind of coming through the trees. I've also got the FJ200 as my main light. That's coming from the same general direction. And then any shadows that we may pick up in the background, they're all going to be coming from the same direction as well. So really kind of have intended purpose with how you position your lights based on whatever environment you're in. If the shadows are coming from this way in the background, then make sure the light is coming from that way on your subject. That's why it looks more realistic. So, all right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you through the process of how I'm going to light this. So the first shot I'm going to take is going to be purely ambient. The second shot I'm going to take, I'm going to add my main light. That's going to be the light that hits Olivia's face. And then the third shot I'm going to take is just going to be that hair light, which is going to add that contrast, and you're going to get that nice orange glow coming from the back. So let's go and show you those 3 shots. So first one, we're going to do just purely ambient. So on my FJ-X2M trigger, I'm going to put all the lights to sleep. Real simple to do without even having to walk up to my lights. So this is purely just ambient, and I'm kind of seeing what kind of light I want. All right, go ahead, Olivia, turn your body a little bit towards the light. Turn your head back towards me, good. Just real simple, all right. And that shot right there is just going to be purely ambient. Now, as you can see, we need a lot of help with this shot. We have a dark face, so that's what our next light's going to do. So first thing, I'm now going to introduce the light. I'm shooting manual. On the FJ200, I'm at power level 5.5, which I think is going to light her face fairly well. There you go. And it did. I like it. I've also got some natural sunlight coming through that's hitting her hair. So that's nice hair light, but it's really not golden. It doesn't look like the sun is kind of coming from the back. So that's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna turn on that third light, which is the FJ400 with the full CTO gel. And now I'm really gonna get that glow coming from the top left of the frame. And it kind of looks like sun, and it is a fall day, but it really exaggerates that warm kind of golden color that we get here in the fall. So that's another way that you can get creative using lighting and really kind of control the story and make your own scene. Okay, so now you see how cool that was, faking sunlight on a cloudy day. I love doing that. All right, so opposite of making things look like you're shooting on a sunny day, we can also make it look like we're shooting in the middle of the night, under moonlight maybe. And so this photo that you see right here was actually taken in the middle of the day. So here's the setup. What I did was I took my light using a 26-inch Octa S off camera coming from the left to the right, and I put a tungsten gel on that light. From there, I told my camera that I was shooting in a tungsten white balance. So the only thing the tungsten light was hitting was my subject. That's why she looks great. Her skin tones look excellent. But what happens to the rest of the scene? Stuff that's not being lit by tungsten light, that turns a blue color. And so another thing, I actually made my shutter speed much quicker, kind of killing that ambient light, making it look like it was, nighttime. So this was actually done in the middle of the day, and here's a photo that shows really what the environment looked like. Pretty cool what you can do to kind of trick your camera. This next slide shows the exact same thing where I actually took these photos within 10 seconds of each other. The only thing I did was change the white balance. So here's the setup. Going to the outside of the building, I actually had a simple speed light with a CTO gel. And that CTO is color temperature orange, and that makes it look really warm. So the image on the right was actually done with an auto white balance. It had a warm orangey color light, and the camera did all the decision making in auto mode. The image on the left was when I told the camera I was in that tungsten mode that you saw in the previous example. And that added a lot of blue tones to the photo. And here's what it looked like just simply changing the white balance. I'm telling the camera I'm in two different white balances, and these are the kinds of results that I can get. It's really cool what you can do with flash, especially when you put a tungsten gel on your flash. All right, this next slide shows a really cool trick that you can do in camera using the FJ400 mask function. Now, what we did with this is we actually were with Matt Hernandez. We went to a tiny little setup. We used minimal gear, and we made these really cool composites in the middle of a locker room. So here's how it was done. You need a minimum of 2 different strobes. The first strobe is going to go off and it's going to light your subject. And that's sequence 1. The second strobe is going to go off and truly just light your background. And what that's going to do is that's going to create a silhouette of your subject. So here's shot number 1. We lit Franklin, and it's a beautiful portrait just using a simple beauty dish as our modifier, and the light is lighting that white background and kind of making it a gray color. So we told that first light that was sequence 1. Then we told the second light, the light that's hitting the background, you're going to go off on sequence 2. And that fired and flashed and made a perfect composite of Franklin. Now, you have to do this really quick, and I recommend using a high burst mode. There's no recycle time that you need to worry about because you're pulling flashes from 2 different strobes. So there's literally 0-second recycle time. And you can create these 2 different images. Once you find your plate meaning the background that you wanted to put your subject within, you then drag and drop your subject onto that plate, and it looks like it was done in the stadium. Now, something that I recommend for this is you want to mimic the lighting on your background when you're shooting it in studio or in the locker room in this case. Because if you don't, if you have the light coming from this direction on your subject and you have the light coming from this direction on your background, something's going to look off, just like when we were outside and I showed that example. And the last thing I want to talk about when we talk about getting creative with Flash is remember that even though the flash is bursting, it's still light. And so you can still do painting with light. Painting with light is one of the simplest things and most fun things you can do in photography. And most people associate it with flashlights or continuous lights, but you can also do it with Flash. Now, this photo I love. This is one of my favorite examples. RIT up in Rochester actually does a class project each year. And this was a really cool one, where they actually went out and they photographed the Kodak building at night. Now, what they did, they told all the people who were involved in the project to come out with a flash. Some had powerful flashes, maybe a 400 watt second, and some had, a 75 watt second speed light. Didn't matter. But what they did was they had each person who was out that evening point their lights at different portions of the building. And so what they did a long exposure. You can kind of see that with the cloud movement. And they had the people point and flash their flash or speed light at different portions of the building. And it created this cool little image. Now, I think this was a really cool use of painting with light, and it's interesting to know that it was done with flashes. So I pulled this from Petapixel. Awesome, awesome job to those people involved. So I hope you learned something unique here today in this class. And it was a pretty deep dive that we went into Flash, into modifiers, a whole myriad of things. But definitely, if you want to learn more, I encourage you to check out the Westcott University. The URL is right up on the screen. We'll also put it down in the description below. And if you want to also kind of join our community, the Westcott Lighting community on Facebook is a great opportunity to kind of see what people are using with the FJ series of strobes. There's new posts every single day, and it's really engaging. Again, thank you so much for watching today. If you haven't subscribed and you found this content valuable, make sure you subscribe below. We'd love to have you involved in our community, and definitely leave a comment below. If you have any additional questions, certainly ask us. We'll be happy to reach out and get that information to you, or put it in the next video. Thanks for watching.